Good morning or good afternoon for those of you who are joining us from overseas locations today. Welcome to our OneStrand webinar session on implementing an S1000D project and what you need to know. This session is actually going to be a multi-part series. We'll be starting it this month and then we'll be doing the second half next month. I think most of the people present in the room know who OneStrand is, so I'll do the express version of this story. So OneStrand is a industry-leading technical consulting, services and software solution provider. With the combination of a shared vision of world-class experts, OneStrand continues to provide our customers and partners with the most comprehensive set of solutions available for creating and managing the lifecycle of technical documentation and data. We've provided solutions for every facet of the technical documentation lifecycle, from authoring to archiving for air, land, sea and space programs. And we have over 25 years experience in technical documentation management, combined with decades of actually developing software. We offer a very cost-effective, user-friendly S1000D solution, and we work closely with agencies to ensure stringent requirements for defence and aero industries are met. We brought to market the first industry's first modular S1000D hosted solution, and that's our OneStrand Air solution. I'll give you the details to that on the next slide. And we partner with our customers by creating an atmosphere of learning and encouraging accountability, and then earn our place every day with our customers and our valued long-term relationships. In regard to our products that we have, they're known as the R4I S1000D suite of products. This is not all the products, but the common ones that people use on a day-to-day basis. We have the CSDB, or Common Source Database, which is, of course is essential for managing and publishing your content to IETP or IETM and other electronic delivery. R4I Writer is our powerful XML authoring tool, and we've optimised that for the S1000D data formats. Writer is available in a standalone edition as well, so you don't have to have a CSDB to utilise our R4I Writer technology. Our viewer is our royalty-free online and offline IETM viewer. Now, R4I Viewer is for Windows, and we have R4I MobiTP, which is also royalty-free for Android and the iOS. R4I Binder is our powerful drag and drop tool for creating manuals and handbooks on the fly. Doesn't have to be just from S1000D content. Any HTML or XML you can utilise for publishing, and we just need to develop a style sheet to be able to publish those. And we have IPD Manager, which is our illustrated parts data manager, which is a time-saving tool that generates hundreds of IPD data modules specifically in a few minutes from engineering parts and spreadsheet databases. And just a quick mention there, Binder is also available as a personal edition as well. So again, if you wanted to use our binding tool for PDF print publishing, then you can get it in a personal standalone edition without the CSDB as well. The hosted platform I mentioned earlier, so these products are available in our hosted platform, a combination of different versions depending on what your deliverable requirements are. You can get different packages, and they're available from our OneStrand Air platform at shop.onestrand.com. So if you would like to see more information on that one. Our presenter today is Ms. Rita Nye. For those of you who may not have met Rita in person, good morning, Rita.
Morning, Tammy.
Rita is a senior consultant at Absolute Data and now OneStrand because of the relationship between our sister companies. Rita has been working with the team for 11 years now, 14 years experience in IT, with of course the last 11 specialising in the HTML and XML publishing systems analysis and development. And also in particular S1000D and dynamic database publishing projects. Those projects of course include delivery to web and complex print requirements for our customers. Rita is a trainer and who specialises in S1000D in our software, which is obviously very helpful and why she is involved so much in our webinar sessions. Rita not only trains in our own XML authoring tool R4I Writer, but she's also assisted customers with configuring and training in Arbortext Editor and Adobe FrameMaker from version 7, so that she's showing her time in industry there.
Way too long.
Rita is most well known for her style sheet development in both XSLT and in particular in XSLFO. So on that note, I am going to hand over to you, Rita.
Fantastic.
And let's see what we have in store today.
Okay. So let's make sure that we're able to actually see my screen.
We can see your screen.
So before I actually started having the conversation about what's necessary for implementing an S1000D project, I thought, let's find out from everybody attending, do they currently have a project that they need to implement? And let's just get some little bit of feedback from the members or the team that are attending.
Yep.
So you get the choice of yes, no, not sure, or are looking at in the future.
Okay, I've just launched that poll, Rita.
Fantastic. So let's see how we go. Hopefully everyone's able to participate.
Yep.
And that will then certainly give us a little bit of an introduction to where people are at the moment.
Excellent. That was quick. Faster than yesterday's group. Okay. So I'll close that poll and share the results. Okay, so similar to yesterday. Yesterday was a 50 of yes, they have a project to implement, and 50% were looking for it as a future.
Yep.
Today we've got 75% of people are currently right now looking to implement an S1000D project, and 25% looking to the future.
Fantastic.
So interesting results, and that's good because it's, I mean, everyone, one would hope that if you were going to attend an S1000D theory session that you do have an interest there. So I'm going to hide that poll, Rita, and let's kick off the discussion.
Okay. So we're going to cover in this multi-part system or sessions 3 core areas. The first is, what is S1000D? Then we're going to look at what do you need for that project, and then we're going to have a bit of a discussion about what's the final deliverable options, so that people can see where all of this ends up being. Now, for what is S1000D? Okay, you've made a decision that you're either the end customer, that you want to have this content written in S1000D, or you have a customer that's told you you want this content to be written in S1000D. There's got to be some sort of decision point that makes you choose why are you writing in S1000D. There's a logic to that. Now, with that, you suddenly go, great, what's S1000D? You know, it's suddenly a new terminology that no one's spoken about previously.
Where do I need to start?
Where do I start with this?
Yep.
Okay. One of the things I would be suggesting to anybody that's heading down this path is they do need to have a copy of the S1000D specification.
Start with the spec. Download that.
Before they can download it, though, they do need to make at least one decision, which is the version or the issue of the spec they're going to comply to.
So before you, because you have to download each version, so
yes,
pick your version.
Pick your version, and you've got anything from 1.6 all the way through to 4.2. So there's a wide range of versions that are available. So you really need to have a little bit of a knowledge before you can download the spec, because it's no use downloading every version of the spec.
Yeah, obviously if your customer has dictated, you're going to download whatever version.
Correct. So if the customer has told you, you're going to write this content in S1000D and we want it written in 4.2, you've got no choice to make.
Go get the 4.2.
You're going to get the 4.2. So you're going to jump up to the s1000d.org website.
Yep.
Go to downloads. You can register, which means that they will give you updates and notifications when new versions are coming out, but you can also go through it and not register and just download it. So you've got a couple of choices with that. Now, the one thing I would not suggest is download it, open up the PDF and start reading from page 1.
No, that's a big read.
Well, 4.2 is about 3,700 pages, but it's great if you're having issues going to sleep. Oh, absolutely.
It'll knock you out.
It'll knock you out because you're just going to go, my God, this is killing me. So you want to have the spec, but the spec is a piece of reference material.
Yeah, so don't read from front to back.
Don't read from front to back. So you've got the spec. Then what you need to do is you need to start to do some research. So you need to find people who can provide you with assistance. So that's where you want to look at training courses, and that can either be sessions like what we're running now, as in our webinars and our blogs and our short videos that we produce. You can look for actual physical training courses that give you that introduction to S1000D. So you want to be able to find some courseware that's going to help you understand this ginormous thing called S1000D. You also want to be able to talk to industry colleagues, because believe it or not, if you're already writing technical documentation, you've already got some experience. It's just now implementing it into an S1000D world. You're not literally having to go through and go, how do I write content? You're just trying to apply that spec to your knowledge that you've already got.
Mm-hmm.
So talking to your colleagues and getting some understanding of what they've done.
Anyone else have any? Yeah.
Correct. And that, of course, also means, you know, all of your past experience is always going to be beneficial. You can hire an external consultant. You know, that's the purpose of what the consultant's there, to try and help you, guide you through this S1000D minefield of getting to understand what do you really need to know at this point in time. So we can go through and do all of that. Now, the internet is a wonderful thing. It can give you lots of resources that you can find.
There's webinars like this going on. There's videos.
Yep.
There's past presentations from S1000D conferences.
Absolutely. There are so many places that you can get some resources to help you understand.
That are often free.
S1000D. Yep. So try and utilise those. The biggest thing I'd have to say is don't panic. There was a lovely range of books that was written by Douglas Adams, which was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And in that, the cover of the book said, don't panic. You're going to do the same thing here. We want to make sure that you're going through this in a logical process. You don't want to have to jump in and go, we've got to start writing it, but what is it?
Or we've got to read the 3,500 pages. No need to do that.
No.
And again, like you said, the past experiences really do assist, and in particular because S1000D has grown with air industry, defence industry, you know, literally internationally, countries and you know, industries. Shipping is in it now, rail is using it, because there's such a contribution from industries and globally. There's a lot of people's worldly experience has gone into developing the spec and learning lessons from past specs. So what do we learn that we could carry through from ATA?
Correct, because if we look back at the S1000D spec, the origins of it, it's a combination of mil specs and ATA.
Yep.
So if you've already written in any of those environments,
which were both structured as well, so SGML, some of them XML, so
you've already got the starting point.
You've got basic experience. So if you've got SGML and or XML, structured authoring is a start. You'll understand a lot of the concepts from numbering.
Correct.
The logic, you know, behind it. And I mean, really, to me, they've taken what was first steps with ATA and MIL standards, and they've really pushed for that reuse, and not just reuse in S1000D, but from other S-series specs, right?
Absolutely.
They're really encouraging the how can we automate
and centralise and share all this information.
Yes.
See it. So it is a big topic.
Yep.
It takes time to become comfortable with what is S1000D.
But just focus on the pieces you need to focus on at the times.
Correct.
And, I mean, yes, you know, it is good to have a core knowledge of, you know, the fundamentals of it. And I mean, this session today is a classic, right? We're going to highlight to people, okay, what are the core things you must know before you even kick off?
Correct.
And need to do some homework on. And then you can dig in further as your experience comes about, right?
Absolutely. So you can see what we're looking for to get our knowledge on the S1000D side of it.
Yep.
So with that, what we want to do is we then want to really start to look at what do we need for the project. Now, as we've already said, this is a two-part session.
Yep.
So we're not going to get through all of these in today's session.
Yep.
But these are the categories that we want to look at. So we want to look at our business rules and the breaks.
Yep.
We want to look at style sheets, the DMRL, CIRs, applicability, and the internal review cycle. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And this is very much based on a blog series that we did last year, at the end of last year, where we started to get some really good feedback to say, hey, this information is really helpful.
And that's why we thought, let's focus on this for the webinar.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so business rules and breaks.
Yep.
Okay, so business rules. What the heck are business rules? Business rules are the decisions that an organisation makes that's going to be the implementation of S1000D. Okay, so these are what we call the human readable pieces of information.
So this is like the approach, the processes, procedures that you might hold in-house for doing something.
Correct.
But our focus is on what we're going to be doing to implement S1000D specifically.
Correct. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we're only looking at implementation of S1000D. There's other things associated with that, such as your LSAR systems. You're also looking, so these business rules won't dictate how the organisation is going to be run. It's how the project will be implemented. So hence
it can touch, like you said, outside of just S1000D.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's got to look at things. If you look at the spec, there's actually 10 categories that you've got to cover. So as we said, the very first decision you need to make is what version of the spec are you working with.
Yep.
So you can't start working inside the project until you've made that decision.
Yeah. Well, and because, of course, what version dictates what you've got available to do, right?
Correct. Because the later version, so let's assume that you're working with one of the 4 series spec. You've got more capabilities available in the 4 series than what you have in the 3
the older ones,
or the 2 or even the 1 series.
Yeah, I mean the ones were in SGML, right?
Correct.
So, yeah, so all a very different game, depending on your version.
So we need to make that decision. So the first thing we've got to do is make the decision, what is the version of the spec that we're working with? Once we've made that decision, that then starts to give us those indications of what we can do now. So we need to look at things such as how you're going to present the content, what tools are you going to use, what is your actual final deliverable. So you can see already that it's starting to cover a whole range of categories. And we've got to make sure that everything that we document, everybody knows about it. So these business rules become a living document.
And I'm kind of getting the feel that just by going through the process of preparing some business rules, you're kind of going to learn a fair bit about S1000D along the way as well, right? If it's covering these categories, then, I mean, you're talking about, customer deliverables and, we should take a look at what, software we're going to be using and how we're going to implement certain features. So all of a sudden where you'll start to dig into S1000D even just with this exercise.
Correct. Additionally, inside the business rules, you've got to put in all your communication processes. So how are you going to communicate internally?
Okay, so with your team.
With your team.
Yeah.
How are you going to communicate with your subcontractors if you're using subcontractors or third parties?
Yeah. Oh, so some suppliers that might be supplying you stuff. Okay.
Correct.
Yep.
And how are you going to communicate with your customer?
Right, so that is part of the guidelines for
Correct.
How we're going to do
because this. Because you don't want, okay, so if you've got, let's say you've got a team of 10 people on your project that's working actively on the S1000D project.
Yep.
That's a combination of illustrators, authors, management, the whole lot. So you've got 10 people. Are all 10 of those people allowed to communicate to the customer?
Probably not. Probably the knowledgeable person that's going to do the S1000D deliverables would be the person.
Additionally, if your end customer, say it's a defence, it's defence, doesn't matter which defence.
Mm-hmm.
Is all of your 10 staff going to be allowed to communicate with anybody at defence? No.
No.
There's going to be primary people that you're going to be allowed to communicate with.
So there's some project management 101 stuff in there as well. So,
correct.
So, okay, so this is all very common sense sounding so far.
Absolutely. It's just putting it down into logical, readable pieces of information.
Yep.
So we've now got our communication processes starting to be documented. We then need to start to look at what types of content do we need to deliver. Now, inside S1000D, there's a whole pile of schemas, and those schemas derive how you can write the content. Similar to your ATA spec or your mil specs.
Ditto, even.
Ditto. Everything, when you're writing it, it's got a very defined structure. S1000D have broken that up into multiple schemas. So if you want to write descriptive content, you're going to use a descriptive schema. If you're going to write the instructions on how to do a maintenance task, you're going to use the procedural schema. So inside your business rules, you'll actually document these are the fine decisions. Yes, we're going to use that schema, but we're going to have even more defined information. So we can have things such as in a descriptive data module, when you're doing a random list, it's not a random list until you've got 3 bullet points, because a random list of 2 bullet points really isn't a random list. So you're getting it. So inside S1000D, a random list with 1 bullet point is perfectly valid.
Structurally correct.
It's structurally correct.
However.
But is it really a list? Maybe not.
So, again, that's the sort of thing that you'd write in, and these are the guideline documents that people are going to be using.
Correct. So you want to have these business rules that are the human readable piece of information.
And I'm thinking there's a fair chance that the customers may have a say in some of this, or you may interact with them, or they might have even handed you their business rules, right, to work to.
Correct. So you can have a combination of those business rules. So you can provide to the customer, look, these are our business rules. The customer will go, yeah, no, you're using ours. Or it could be a combination of the two. So at some point you need those business rules. And associated with that is breaks.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question. So why does everyone go business rules and breaks? Like it's kind of the follow-on statement.
Okay, so business rules are the human readable piece of information.
So think of it almost, it could be like a Word document.
It could be.
Sitting at like a policy document right there for the team to use.
Correct. Breaks is the computer readable piece of information.
Okay, so business rules exchange.
Yes, so that's where you get your breaks from. Now with your breaks, it's very focused on authoring. Okay, so because it's about, like you said, computer readable, so these are rules or code that help us implement what you've written in your business rules. Correct.
While we're authoring.
Correct.
Okay.
So anything that you make a decision on that's going to directly affect the author and how they're going to write the content, that's a breaks.
Okay.
So things such as a random list is not a random list until you've got 3 list items.
So we could put that in a breaks.
We can put that into a breaks.
Okay, so then you immediately go to my authoring tool, I want it to have a breaks validation in it, right? Because it's going to make sure that the authors are doing the right thing as they're going along.
So you want to be able to put that information into the breaks. Now, you can't develop a breaks until you've actually analysed your business rules.
Makes sense, right?
Now, with the analysis of your business rules, as I said, there's 10 categories, which is great, but what they've done in version 4.1 and 4.2 of the spec is they've introduced your BRDP.
Okay, which on the screen there is Business Rules Decision Point. Okay.
And with that, they've then issued a BRDP index. So instead of you having to open up the S1000D specification and search for BRDP, because it's spread throughout the whole 3,500 pages of the PDF, what they've done is they actually give you an index. Now, with the S1000D specification and these BRDPs, each one is given its own unique number. So it's BRDP. Then you've got the company who has created the decision. So if it says S1, it's the S1000D organisation, and then there's a 5-digit numerical number, which starts at 00001 and just keeps on incrementing.
Right.
So for every decision that you need to make, there's a number that goes with that.
So we should almost be having this index open and available to guide us and then refer back to the spec as we're actually writing our business rules in the first place, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so we've got kind of 3 documents going on. We've got the one we're developing, which is the business rules, the index which will guide us, and it's got all the notes and tips and
it's got some of the information.
Yeah, and I guess, well, it's almost, because it's a spreadsheet, isn't it? It's almost you want to sit down with everyone, logistics engineers, everyone, and sort of go through those decision points, right? And then...
Yes, so when the initial 4.1 and 4.2 came out, you had to search through the spec to find all the BRDPs.
Okay, so this is like the go-to document, yeah. And you can write notes and stuff in it because it's a spreadsheet.
Well, what they did was with the patch that came out,
yep,
they've actually moved, or they've put into a spreadsheet all the BRDPs.
So you don't have to
troll through the spec
yeah,
to find them.
Yeah.
Okay, so it gives you that option to be able to locate that information.
And I think it is very handy because, people literally do get in a room and go, okay, so who needs to be involved in what decisions in the specification to make our business rules when we're writing our business rules. So having a spreadsheet like that, you can set meeting slots, of, okay, we need these people to go through these and make decisions on this, and we document them, and then you get another team in, that you might be using.
Yeah. So you've got the S1000D decision points, so BRTPs that S1000D's decided. That's not the only decisions you need to do. There may be other decisions that you need to implement, so you can make your own BRDPs.
Okay, right.
So, so with that, it would be BRDP, and it would be an identifier that it's yourself.
So something unique to your business, for instance. Okay.
Yep. And then you'd start off with 00001. Now, inside the spreadsheet that they've now made available, I've grabbed just a little bit of it just so that you can actually see what sort of information you can get into that. Now, hopefully it'll...
It's a slow refresh.
I love...
There we go.
Okay, so this is the 4.2 spreadsheet. Now, you'll be pleased to know that in 4.1 there was around about 550 decisions. In 4.2 they dropped about 50 to 60, but then added on a few more.
And of course, not every decision is something that you need for your project, right?
Correct. So what you need to do is you need to actually literally look at what are each of those decisions.
And they've given a definition, so you can go, oh, I don't think it applies to us. And if it does, now go to the chapter that they've indicated in the spec.
So things such as BRDP decision 1 is use the I and O. So decide whether or when to use the alpha characters I and O.
Okay, now what are we talking about? Let's go to chapter 1.3.
Correct.
Right,
and this is very much inside your data module code. Are you going to use the letters I and O? Mainly because when we look at those, they get very confused between I and O and 1 and 0.
Yes, so it is a common one that gets dropped, right, particularly in military programs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So these are the sort of decisions that we're starting to make. Now, the order that this index is in, it's purely from the spec and when they first made the decision. With that, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the absolute first decision you've got to make. Obviously, you can't make that decision until you've made the decision what version of the spec you're working with, and a few other decisions that need to go with it. So all the spec has done is identified these are all the decisions that we deem you need to make a decision on.
Okay, so can I just hold you there, and in particular because there's a question that's come in, and this is probably a helpful one. So in this scenario, we've gone to the business rules index, which is our spreadsheet. We've looked at the first one and it says, are we using I's and O's? And if we make the decision we're not, we would document that in our business rules, which is our human readable document. And that's probably the type of thing that a rule could be written in a Brex to validate for.
Correct, it is. So when we're looking at our validation, we've got to look at it from the point of view of where can we validate that. So for the I and the O, we'd be looking at our system, subsystem, sub-subsystem, unit or assembly, and even our variance information that goes into making up the data module code. So yes, with that information, it will be listed in the human readable piece of information. But it's also programmatically verified. So we can then put it into our
Make sure the authors don't use the I's and O's. So we've got this Brex, which is the non-human readable. Well, it is readable, but
it is readable,
but it's not pretty.
It's not a pretty one.
No, and it's codey. So and so our authoring tool will do the checks behind us for the author to make sure they haven't used those I's and O's.
Correct.
So then we know they're sort of less things that the authors have to be remembering. And of course, this is one of the values of a Brex, right, is it speeds up authoring and speeds up validation.
Correct.
So the opportunity to get rejection from the customer is reduced.
Absolutely. So if you think of it, if you didn't have a Brex, now remember every data module must reference to a Brex. So for the older projects, they would just use the bike Brex.
The default one that came from
that comes
spec.
with the standard spec samples. So if you don't have a Brex for your project, when an author is writing content, when they get to the point of going, okay, I'm finished, then they've got to bring
the guide back out or have it sitting beside them.
Have the guide sitting open. And they're going to have to troll through and find all of the points where they've got to make decisions, and that's when they've literally got to go through and go,
oh, did I do all those things?
Did I cover all of those? And
QA then do the same internally, and then, of course, it goes back out to the customer.
Correct. So even though it's a painful process at the start of a project
to sit down, analyse, write your Brex, it's, of course, worth it long-term for the...
Long-term? It's going to save you thousands of dollars and thousands of man hours.
Rework is incredible.
Now, you're not just restricted to a single Brex.
Okay, yes.
You can do what's called a layered Brex. So inside your organisation, so let's pick on defence. It's easy to pick on defence, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So we have defence as the overarching organisation. So they're going to have a set of business rules.
Yes, so they normally do as a global base.
Global. Then if we start to look at the different arms of defence.
So let's say we've now got an Army program.
So we can have Army, Air, Navy, or if we're also looking at Marines, with Marines and Coast Guard and such. So you can have business rules that are defined for each specific arm of defence. And then underneath that, you can have business rules that relate to a single project.
Yes, or a program.
So you would reference to that project business rules, which will reference to the arm of defence, which will reference to the global.
Core. Okay. So that would be 3 Brexes, and they're classed as layered. And your software tool, again, your authoring, needs to be able to understand how to work through a layered Brex and go, what's the highest rule?
Correct. And when you're working with a layered Brex, you need to make sure that a decision that's been made in a lower one is not contradicted in a higher one.
Yes, of course.
So they've got to be compatible. So when you're creating those Brex,
that does have to be tested. And
it needs to be validated. And usually what happens is you'll make your big global decisions at the top, but then when you get down to the project...
You're getting the tighter rules,
You're getting the tighter rules. So you may find that in the project decision Brex, you've only got your S&S coding. So that you're actually only identifying...
Might be just very specific things.
What's specific numbering that's going to be used for the system, subsystem, sub-subsystem.
So we kind of have the generalised rules, then we might get for a division, let's say we're going Army, they'll tighten up things like they might, Army might go, okay, we always we allow to go down to 4 deep in a list, for instance.
Correct.
And then we go for the project-specific stuff. And like you said, a lot of that's very focused on numbering and things like that.
Absolutely. So
okay, that's a layered bricks.
That's a layered bricks.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand if that's a requirement for the project.
Okay, but that's all the business rules, which, I mean, how many times have we nagged in just about every webinar that, and by the way, everything we're talking about today, you will have wanted to put in your business rules.
Correct. But you've got to remember the differences between a business rules and a bricks.
Bricks, yes.
Okay, and it's really hard to write the bricks if you haven't written the business rules.
If you haven't made the decisions and written the business rules. Okay.
Okay, so that's what we're sort of looking at when we start to discuss business rules and bricks.
Yep.
Hence why you always see it listed as business rules
and bricks.
Yes. Because they're physically 2 separate things.
Yeah.
Okay, which then leads us into style sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as we're starting to write our business rules, we're going to start to identify how is this content to be presented.
Mm-hmm.
So as we know, if we're writing an S1000D project for an item delivery, a lot of customers will go, oh yeah, look, it's okay for it to look a little bit like S1000D. They may not want to see all of the information that's in the identification and status block.
Yeah.
But in terms of general presentation of the content,
people are normally okay with the spec.
They're pretty comfortable with it because you're looking at the content of a single piece of information for that one particular procedure. So let's pretend we're looking at procedural content.
And the S1000D spec has a base style suggestion. And again, everything's a suggestion, right? It's a specification.
It's a spec.
It's not a standard.
It's not a standard.
Yeah.
If it was a standard, you'd have to follow it. But because it's a spec, no, you don't.
Yeah.
So you can deviate from that. So inside your business rules, if you're doing an IETP or an item, it might be an acceptable process to say, yes, give it to us as S1000D look and feel.
And I think a lot of people, we've said it before in previous, discussions whenever we get into style sheeting, particularly for programs that have never had an IETM or IETP delivery before, when you go, what style do you want? They just blink at you, right?
They do.
and what functionality do you want? Blinking again, so you often going with the core sort of features to a, sort of a level 3 and above item, probably a 4 is more likely, and having the base S1000D styles used is often a good start.
Yes. So
as here we go, so this is the type of thing. And then as soon as they see something, they go, oh, that's great, but wouldn't it be good if we could also do this,
Correct.
this? So until they get something in front of them and get to feel and touch and play, they often, so it's handy to just often go with the base, isn't it, with the base style sheet.
So for IETP, IETM, S1000D, they're usually fairly okay with the core functionality.
Now, I know that you've said XLT, which is for the transformation to HTML. So that's, of course, the IETM, right?
Correct.
So,
Yes.
So people don't realise that at the end of the day, it's a online web delivery with often some extra smarts wrapped in it is what creates an IETM.
Correct. So you've got 2 types of presentations.
Yep.
Now, from a maintainer's point of view, if we presented them with the source XML file, so continuing with running with the 4 series, if we gave them a data module in native view, most
as in the code, XML,
the actual XML code, most of them would end up throwing something at you. You'd get decapitated in some way.
Yeah, you can't give
because that's not how they read the content.
No.
It doesn't give them the understanding of how it's actually going to be presented.
No.
It doesn't, and it also doesn't give you all of the functionality that you're wanting to do.
No, because people expect more interactivity.
Correct. So, and they want it to actually be readable.
Yeah.
Okay, you and I, we can open up an XML file and we can read it.
Notepad and we can read it, but that's not helpful to,
It's not helpful to other users, to the end users. No.
And this is the goal, right? I mean, generally speaking, when we start talking about style sheets, and I mean, we'll get into the bigger topic next month about end delivery focus.
Correct.
But at the end of the day, style sheets are for the end users.
Correct. It's how does the end user want to see that content.
Yep.
So we need to have a style sheet. Now, there's two types of style sheets, as you can see on the screen. We've got XSLTs, which is the transformation to HTML. So it means it's going into a web deliverable environment, IETP, IETM, whichever way you want to call it.
Yeah.
The other one is an XSLFO. An XSLFO is where we want to do transformation to PDF.
Yep. So people are still asking for the printish type of deliverable.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you've still got that requirement. Now, as we were saying, for an IETM, they're sort of happy to have it look a little bit like S1000D.
Yeah.
Fine. Then you go, okay, so for your PDF, we can do the same?
No, that's
and
rare.
They'll go,
so
hell
rare.
No. So you then have to find out what are the requirements for the deliverable into a PDF, because we're now looking at traditional book publication.
And ironically, the industry that you're delivering to will probably stay with something very similar to legacy and past, and maybe a little bit more of a modernisation. But, I mean, you know, the ATA is similar to the old sort of 2200 style. I mean, they do have the new working, the 1000 BR, isn't it?
Yes.
So the Civil Aviation Working Group have sort of modernised a little bit, but it's quite familiar to the sort of old 2200 style. And then your military programs, they want to stay with your... So when you publish this content, and I guess this is a, you know, great, and it again shows that whole reuse and benefits of S1000D and XML, but, you know, you'll be delivering an IETM over here with cool interactivity and interactions that they expect out in the field these days, and particularly for the younger generation.
Absolutely.
But they like that backup sort of PDF print copy, and they want it to look like it's always looked. So ironically, the S1000D content can end up looking like a classic book chapter section, you know, military standard in this particular case for the deliverable.
Absolutely. The benefit that we have with style sheeting, though, is that, yes, there is a cost involved to develop the style sheets.
Yeah.
So if you've got two different customers and they've got two very different output requirements, yes, there is a cost involved to get that content into to be presented that way.
Yeah.
But once it's been developed, then there's no, other than the person's time to sit there and build the book and generate the PDF, which, you know, I can generate a PDF that's 300-400 pages in about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of time. So there's not a heavy cost involved to do that.
Yeah.
The cost is the initial creation
style sheet development. And again, some programs will actually deliver the style sheets, right?
Correct.
I mean, particularly defence, they'll go, here's our business rules, here's our Brex, here's our style sheet, here's our, you know,
so they often everything.
Yeah.
So that's if the defence is working properly and they've really got...
They've got it together.
They've got it together. Okay, so we can have that. But if you look at your traditional pub production process, and let's say we're still in the structured world, and let's say we're working in a frame environment. You've got the documentation, and you've created all of that for customer A. Now you go, okay, we've also got to deliver that same content to customer B, but they've got a totally different presentation requirement. So then you've got to import all your templates, verify that all the auto-generated lists and everything have been generated correctly, and then produce it. So there's a heavy load.
Or even worse if you're in like a Microsoft Word environment, right? Because literally, so in the past, if you had same data that you wanted to deliver to two different customers with two different style specifications,
let's duplicate.
You would just copy all of those files, right? And then you would completely restyle and format. And of course, if there's any update to content, you've now got to go update in both Word books.
Yeah. Or if you start to expand it and you've got 100 customers, there's 100 books that have got the same content, it's just being styled differently.
So that's the stuff we are trying to avoid with moving to XML and S1000D.
Absolutely. So your style sheets will give that particular piece of information. So yes, there is an initial cost to it, but once it's been done, then producing those different deliverables actually becomes quite easy. So we can start to identify that information.
So we've just had someone ask the question here, Rita, and I think they've pretty well just answered exactly what we've been talking about. That as the defence customer, the end user will be using the items. True.
Mm-hmm.
However, the engineering decisions behind the product require the PDF to be filed. Absolutely true, and it's so common to they continue to want to have their PDF in the format they're used to.
Yep.
To be filed with all the other engineering documents, so both versions are required to be delivered. Correct. And is that an easy task? Absolutely.
Absolutely. You can produce both pieces of content.
Yep.
Really easily.
Yep.
Depending on the solution.
Very different functionality, very different looks if you want them to be. I mean, we even have some military programs, how the PDF looks, the core styling as in numbered paragraphs, that type of thing, and, you know, warning caution icons. They still want those same to be used in the item, but of course it's very modular, very interactive.
Correct.
And it's online. So that's the beauty. Like you said, that's what the style sheets are all about.
Correct.
Is let's lock down how we want these style sheets to work, how we want them to look for this particular deliverable, but absolutely you can deliver basically items to different devices, and you can even have different functionality on different devices as well, depending on, you know, size of device. Is it Android? Is it iOS? Is it Windows? You know, what are we working with?
Absolutely.
So that's the beauty, all from the one pool of content, that
Correct.
common source database of content.
Yes, without you having to do major rework to get it to do that different presentation.
Yeah.
So you've got that functionality.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the decisions on how that content is to be presented must be inside your business rules.
Okay, back to the business rules.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the topics that we didn't put into our blog series, but I thought, actually, we really
Kind of falls. Yep.
It kind of falls into it, is your DMRL.
Yep.
Which is your data module requirements list,
Mm-hmm.
or in version 4.1 and 4.2 got renamed to your data management requirements list.
Okay.
Data module requirement list is easy to say. So with this is the list of data modules that you need for your publication to be complete to the deliverable to your customer.
Okay, and that could be by definition of the past publications, right?
Correct.
So what type of information for this program is expected to be delivered? So let's use a military program because it's good exercise as well.
So you've got IPD, or illustrated parts,
is a common one.
It's a common one. Your operator instructions.
Yep.
And your maintenance procedures.
Now, maintenance can be very different levels, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So part of your business rules, you will have identified to what depth you need to provide to the customer.
Okay, so this is back to one of our questions, which was, so engineering will have discussed their expectation on, are they having to do maintenance out in the field, or are they doing remove and replace, for instance, out in the field? So what level of documentation? So is it more operator documentation and just remove and replace, or are we actually getting into whole maintenance tasks?
Correct.
Okay.
So you need to write documentation to the level that is the agreement between you and your customer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's going to create your data module requirements list. Okay.
Correct. Now, with that, you may be writing additional content that's for internal purposes. So the customer might get the box.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the box is.
And ship it to you.
And they'll take it off the asset and they'll replace it with a new box.
Yep.
That box comes back to you.
Yep.
And you do the repair.
Yep. So you internally may need repair instructions, but the requirements list for what you have to deliver to your end customer is this one here, and that's agreed upon.
Correct.
Put in the business rules, and we actually have a deliverable list that we've got to go to.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, in addition to that, because remember, we're talking about projects that aren't a 6-month project.
No.
These are going to be 5, 10, 15, 30-year projects.
Yes, absolutely.
So that means that at the initial development of the project, this is the level that we need. Get the box, take it out,
of course, change,
and put in a new box.
Yeah.
As the project moves, the end customer goes, okay, we know that box is repairable. So we want to be able to do first level repair.
Yeah.
So
or maybe they want fault code analysis moving forward, or
it could be a range of different things.
Yeah.
but it means that your business rules on terms of depth of information being reported back to the customer changes.
Well, and of course anything in business rules can evolve, right? And
Absolutely.
we always say that business rules is a document that is live. It can evolve.
It's a living document.
Yeah.
It changes, it tweaks, it modifies
requirements. Yeah.
As the requirements change. So we need to make sure that we're aware of that. So we need to do that.
Yep.
Now, when we're developing our DMRL, part of what we need to develop is the SNS, the Standard Numbering System.
Yep.
Now, if you don't have an LSAR, so we'll put the LSAR side of it
aside for a moment.
Yep. If you don't have that, you then need to use the specification. Chapter 8 to build your SNS.
Okay.
So it will then go through and identify all of the systems and subsystems that you have. Now, remember, S1000D was initially developed with a combination of mil-spec and ATA. So if you've got an ATA experience, and inside ATA you've got Chapter 25, which is all about the engine. Guess what? S1000D
has implemented that.
System 25 is the engine. So you can start to see that relationship between mil-spec and ATA and S1000D.
And in fact, S1000D even have suggestions for if it's an air program versus a land program, et cetera, don't they? For again, for helping out with this numbering model.
Correct. So you can go through that process. So you need to be able to develop that SNS. That SNS information can go into your bricks. Additionally to your SNS, you've got your info codes. So they also need to go into...
Because they all make up part of the numbering, right, for those data module codes.
And that then tells us what types of data modules we're going to produce. Okay, so that's... It's time-consuming. It's not easy, and it's definitely not...
It's planned. You've got to be working with engineers. You've got to be working with...
It's not a one-person job. This is sit down in a boardroom...
Fight it out.
Fight it out. Let's get these decisions.
No one's leaving this room until we're done.
Correct. And you've got to break it down into all of the systems that make up that whole asset.
What you're actually working on. Okay.
So that's if you don't have an LSAR system.
Okay. So if we're... And particularly with military programs, the LSAR is a common terminology. So we've got a database over here with the engineers.
So engineering has made all of these decisions. They've made the decision of what are the systems that we've got, what are the subsystems. They may not have made decisions on info codes, but they may have made decisions in terms of, we're going to need some descriptive and procedural and crew information.
And there may have been written pockets of information too, very small pockets, but
So what you want to be able to do is get that information that's in the LSAR out.
Pull it out,
into an S1000D environment.
And I mean, again, back to the talking about the benefits of S1000D and data reuse, there is, of course, specs for assuming that you will want to extract that data and bring it in and where possible create your data module codes and even little small amount of content ready to go in those data modules.
The LSAR systems seem to have invented Twitter well before Twitter.
Tweets of text.
It's like 144 characters of information.
Small pockets of text.
Small pieces of information. So as well as getting your SNS out of the LSAR system, you may also be able to get some small pieces of descriptive, procedural and crew information. So that
depending on how complex they've gone in.
Depending on what they've put into the LSAR. It's always dependent on what they've put into the LSAR. Additionally, the LSAR can also store some common information such as tools, spares and consumables.
Of course,
So if they have been put into the LSAR.
Again, we'd want to reuse those, right? And in fact, we've got a whole, next month, we'll be talking about common information, and that's classic examples of common.
So we're going to do that sort of information. So you want to be able to get as much information as possible out of the LSAR that can assist with the creation of the content that we have to produce. It's not going to be a complete set, but hey, it'll give us a starting point of information. So with all of that, we can then start to produce our DMRL.
Okay. Now, I'm going to throw another one at you.
Uh-oh.
So you know, a common problem for and not necessarily legacy programs, but I guess customers that are moving to their first, or we'd like to have an IETM or an IETP, and we'd like to go this thing called S1000D, they still have the logic, of course, that, and again, like we said, military programs, they want that book that looks like to the mill standard. And so because of that mentality of wanting that book, they think in terms of book plans.
Oh, yes.
So, you know, that logic of, okay, we've got a book plan, those 3 books you mentioned. So let's say we've got, you know, basically an illustrated parts, operating procedures and some maintenance stuff. Let's say they're the 3 books. So they expect a book plan.
For each one of those.
That's right. So how do we now associate book plans back to, for S1000D, we're not writing a book.
No, we're not.
We're writing data modules, and you've indicated to what level we have to write. So we've got a DMRL.
Yes.
So now how do we blend the two, a book plan and a DMRL?
Okay, so your book plan. Another way you can think of a book plan is your TOC.
Okay.
So when
your book plan to DMRL is a TOC?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you look at your book plan or your TOC,
yep,
it's going to provide you all of the information of what information needs to be included in all 3 publications.
Okay, so if we sat down, opened up the 3 PDFs and looked at the sort of the bookmarks and the TOCs,
that gives us the indication of what data modules do we need to create.
Okay, because really a book has chapters, and inside those chapters is maybe sections, and a section is often classed as a topic or a data module.
Correct.
So it's the descriptive piece of information, it's the procedure, it's the...
Correct.
Okay.
So every single one of those entries that's inside that TOC.
So they're thinking this book needs to have these things and this information in it.
These are all going to be data modules.
So those information things are going to be data modules.
Correct. Now what you need to do is look at the 3 publications,
yep,
and identify what is common across all 3.
Which there often is.
Which there often is.
Yeah.
Even if you look at front matter.
Yeah.
There's a whole part.
Straight away.
Yeah. A lot of the information that goes into the front matter
is common.
It's common across every single publication.
Yeah, there's like, you know, 8 front pages that are almost identical half
Correct.
the time. Yeah.
So they're going to be 1 data module each.
Yep, so we write it once, we get a data module code once,
and then you reuse
it in all 3 publications.
Correct.
So we almost have to do up like a spreadsheet of this is the book and the structure and the titles and the chapter sections that they relate to, and now put across this is the data module we're writing, and we note that the same data module code being used in all 3 books.
Correct.
Right.
So yes, so you can then go through that process.
And I guess that reuse comes down even further, like images that would be, you know, we'd have images used in illustrated parts and then in maintenance again, the same image.
Correct. So it's a little hard because inside the DMRL, you don't actually need to document anything about reuse of images or what image code you're going to use.
No.
Because there's 2 methods available for image coding.
Yes. Whole nother topic.
Whole nother topic.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to go through. So the DMRL, the only thing that you can put into the DMRL about images is IPD images because they're mandatory.
Right, okay.
Okay, you can't, well, then the schema doesn't say that they're mandatory, but you don't normally write an IPD without an image.
Obviously, it's kind of like, that would be the point.
It's kind of the point for it.
Yeah, so
you go through that process.
Yeah.
So out of your DMRL, there's usually only IPD illustrations that go into it.
Listed and specifically mentioned because you have to put them in there. Yeah.
But if you look at your TOCs or your book plans for the 3 publications, you identify what's common across all 3.
Yeah.
That we can go in. Now, there might be small variations in that, and we're going to be talking about that next session, which is applicability.
Yeah.
But in effect, you've got common content that can go into all 3 or any one.
Yeah, 1, 2, combination of.
Yeah. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to identify that common information.
Yeah.
And reuse it across every publication. You don't want to write it 2, 3, 4 times.
So at the end of the day, it's almost like our DMRL can generate our book plan.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to flip it on its head, and when we're working with customers that think legacy, deliverables type, we need to help educate and set them side by side and give them that comfort factor of
Correct.
This weird list is actually this list. Let's show you how the two are the same.
Yeah. And then back to presentation requirements. Does the end user want to be able to see this wonderful thing called a DMC,
Yeah.
a data module code?
Yeah.
Like it's a whole pile, it's a string of numbers and letters, which most of them just go, yeah, what is it?
Particularly first up. Yeah.
First up.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to understand that. Others may want to say, okay, look, give us the tech name, info name.
Yeah.
Because that's human readable. It makes sense.
Makes sense of what the topic is. It's like a section title.
Yeah. So that's the sort of things you start to have to look at.
Okay, well, I'm excited. We're out of time. And that is the perfect spot for us to finish. So I am just going to grab the screen back. Now, we don't have any time left to do questions. However, I am just going to show Rita's email address at the top there. Mine is at the bottom. If you do think of any questions afterwards, and of course, like I said, this session has been recorded.
Yep.
So Samantha will be sending out details of where you can look at the recording. So if you go back through and think of questions later, don't hesitate to shoot us an email or even keep them for next month's session, and we'll start at that point with were there any questions that you wanted to share or, double check some detail on before we kick off into the rest of the important things that you need to know about S1000D projects. So on that note, we are going to wrap it up today. Thank you everyone for joining us. We do hope you can join us on next month's session, which will complete the picture on the essentials that you need to know when you're working or being asked to deliver an S1000D program. So thank you, Rita. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Wonderful. Fantastic.